AERA in its first 100 years concentrated very heavily on what I call school-centric education, the teaching and learning that goes on in K-12 education and higher education. But it's heavily focused on formal instruction in schools. We ought to begin focusing on some of the instruction and not instruction, learning that goes on outside of schools, in the street. It's very powerful for kids. What kids learn in the street in inner city communities has more influence on who they become than what's going on in the classroom. Maybe we can change that, but we ought to be focusing more on some of these educational transactions that occur outside of the public school system and the public institutions of higher education. I think one of the huge problems, particularly right now in education, is college completion. We're getting more and more people into college, but they're dropping out in huge numbers with huge student debt. Everybody from the president on down is talking about college for all, which is terrific. But there's no point in talking about college for all if all we do is get them in the doors and then they drop out. We need an educated workforce. We've dropped tremendously in comparison to OECD countries. Too many kids going into college, they're not just kids, we now have older people going to college too, end up having to do remediation in college. And remedial courses don't work. They don't manage to teach people what they need, and they tend to drive them out because they're so boring. We need to find a way to get people who have not done well in high school and don't have college level skills up to a college level in a different way. And I think the remediation needs to be embedded in real college work. I think people in education generally and in education research particularly perhaps have an inferiority complex. They're constantly worrying about whether or not they can lead, whether or not they need to improve. I can't tell you how many committees and commissions I've been on trying to improve education research. I think we need to stop worrying about that and instead focus on the big social issues that are facing this country and how education can address some of those. I spend most of my time teaching in maximum security prisons. We incarcerate 2.2 million people in the United States. They need to be educated. Well, I think there's one investment priority that's just super important, and that's what I call usable knowledge. Translating research into the actual things that people need in the field, in practice and in policy. So it's taking research about cognitive science or about any field and creating texts, toys, and tests that can actually help people improve their practice. Or for policymakers, giving them the charts, the data in analyzed forms so they can take the research and actually use it. We have volumes of research that doesn't get used, and that's a crime. One of the things I care a great deal about in education research is that we get some of the research and scholarship out of the laboratory, so to speak, and into the field. And there's an awful lot of cognitive science that still needs to be mined.